Hey team, welcome back. So now we want to work, now that we have read and created and read our backlog, we want to continue reading, because right now we're just retrieving a list, but we want to get to a point when we can actually retrieve a single project task, which is what we're going to need so we can actually start updating it. So with that in mind, we're just gonna do the happy path in this video, and then we're gonna obviously handle all the edge cases. But right now, let's just focus on the happy path. So first, we're going to go to the project task repository, and we're going to enable our repositories in order to be able to find a project task by the project sequence. So we're gonna again use the power of JPA and try and find it by project sequence. And just to refresh your memories, when we're talking about finding it by project sequence, and I'm just going to bring Postman here. So if we try and find a backlog, an existing backlog, we're talking about this, okay, with the number, right? But this is a string, even though it has numbers in it, okay? So find it by project sequence, which is an attribute, a valid attribute in our project task, and string sequence. I just want to do a double check real quick, and I just want to make sure that the project sequence is actually non-updatable. Okay, we cannot update this, and just to be on the safe side, I'm gonna set it as unique true. We're not going to have or we're not going to give the user any opportunity to actually change this at any level, and the fact that we cannot update it is going to enforce the fact that it's going to enforce its uniqueness. So this shouldn't be a problem, because we also, when we create a new task, we don't pass this at all. But I'm just going to put that there for now. I don't think we will have a use case in which we will have to even handle the exception. But yeah, I'm just going to put it there just to be on the safe side of things. So perfect. Yeah, because whenever you want to enforce a search by an attribute, in the context of what we're doing here, you want to make sure that it's unique too, that it's distinct, so there is no ambiguity in the query. Okay, so then with this in place, we want to go to a project task service, and then we're going to create a new method, public project task. It returns a project task, find PT by project sequence, and we're gonna obviously pass it the sequence, and then this is going to return the project task repository find by sequence, and then we're going to pass it the sequence. All right, so what are some of the edge cases that we have to think about is make sure obviously that we are searching on the right backlog. And I promise that once we start working on the UI, this is going to make more sense. But the way I want to set up the route is that it takes the backlog ID, and it also takes the project sequence, so that there's no ambiguity, and so that we don't allow we don't allow the user to find it unless the project actually exists, which won't anyway. But I just want to have that safeguard there, and I also want the backlog or project identifier on the route as well. So yeah, we're gonna have a few cases that we have to handle here, but for now, let's just happy path this. Sometimes when you start thinking too much about all the things that could go wrong, then you kind of lose track. So sometimes it's good to just get things working before worrying too much about everything that you need to control as far as exceptions and whatnot. Okay, so here in order for us to get our by ID, and I'm just looking at my notes right now. Okay, hope that that's not a problem. I just want to make sure that I follow up my game plan. Basically, we want to pass on this get mapping. We want to pass two parameters. We want to pass the backlog ID, because we're searching within the project, obviously, and then we want to pass the project task ID or PT ID. We can call this PT ID. Okay. Then we want to do a public response entity of type, and it's obviously a generic type. And then we're going to call this get project task. Okay, and then we're gonna pass the two path variables that we define, and which is going to be the string backlog ID. I'm just gonna copy and paste this just to avoid any typos. See, there are scenarios in which copy and pasting is fair game, and it actually makes sense. I'm gonna close out of this string and then the PT ID. It's just for me to make some more space for you folks here. Okay, so with that in place, we're taking those two parameters, and then what we're going to do is that we're going to try and find the project task. Project task equals, which we're gonna get from the project task service, find by project sequence. Okay, and if we go back here, yes, it's find PT by project sequence. Okay, and we're gonna pass it the backlog ID, and we're gonna pass it the PT ID. Okay, and we're gonna pass this for now. Okay, because we're gonna do some validation with this one here. But I think for now, just gonna update this to take the backlog ID. And you know what? Just to keep things nice and clean, or cleaner, because I know that I've already made some no-nos here. Let's just keep the same naming convention that we're using on the controller, just so that this is not, it doesn't have any ambiguity here. And then if it finds it, it's going to return a new response entity of types. Of type project task, obviously, and then we're gonna obviously get the project task that we found, along with the HTTP status of OK. Cool. And again, we're just happy pathing this. It actually needs to. We're just testing in the good scenario that everything works, and just so you know, we're not doing anything with this right now. But if the nice scenario works, then we're going to start working on things. And remember this path. Remember this path here. It's going to take two parameters. It's going to take the backlog ID, although it's not doing anything with it right now, and it obviously takes the project task sequence. Okay, so with that in place, we're going to go back to our Postman. We are going to get a project by ID, right? And we're gonna try and find. Actually, we only have one here. No, I'm sorry. What I wanna see is the backlog that we have for test 1. And it's good. We have quite a few. This is really good. So we're gonna open another one, and we're gonna copy paste this. And remember, we're passing the backlog ID, and then we're just gonna grab a random one. Let's grab test 1-5. And then just pass it and just pass it this project sequence as an additional parameter, and this should return our object just like it is in our database. And remember, nothing wrong with double checking everything. We do have that one on our database, and it's actually returning everything that we have there. And this is really good. Okay, so now let's use a few minutes to discuss a few things. So what happens if I try and pass one that doesn't exist? Doesn't return anything. but we still get a 200 OK. That's not good. And then obviously we haven't implemented anything for this, but I wouldn't want us to be able to retrieve that if we don't have the right backlog ID. Okay, just because there are many considerations, and one is that in the and actually I'm going to show you right now, because I really want us to be on the same page as to why I'm doing this, because I'm pretty sure that some of you might be like, why are you so invested on the path, right? Why are you so invested on what happens on the path? Like if we have the right sequence, it doesn't really matter. That might be a fair statement, but I want to show you what happens in the app that we have on the cloud. I'm gonna bring it here. This is what we have on Heroku. Again, it's in the first section, in the introduction section, so you can go play with it. If we go to the project board, excuse me, this is where we do where we're using that endpoint, and this endpoint actually uses the project code or the project identifier and the task sequence. But and I'm always very careful with tools that allow for descriptive URL searching like this one, because then users like to take shortcuts and say like, hey, you know what, I'm just looking for 51 here, which doesn't exist obviously. And then the users can also make mistakes, right? Dashboard, project board, view and update. Users can also be like, hey, you know what? I don't remember which one I'm looking for, so I'm just gonna do, test update. They can put a bad project code here, and then trying to find this one, and it shouldn't work, right? It should be like, hey, you need to have both the project ID and the task. They both need to be valid, right? And that's one thing that I want to enforce, because I also remember I also want to enforce that if you're a different user, and this is also another reason why I want to do this, I also want to enforce that if you are a different user, that I cannot go here and then try and update or go to test R, which is the one that we were looking at. You see, I shouldn't be able to go to that project. I shouldn't be able to go to that project board at all. Test R. And let me go back. Well, obviously don't have anything there, but I shouldn't be able to see that if I add a project task. And then if I say test R, which is on the other account, I shouldn't be able to find it. So that's why I want to do that double check, right? Because then I just want to prevent the user from trying to find manually a project task that's not there, that doesn't exist in a given project. And I know that that's a mouthful, but believe me, I know people. I've seen people working with these kind of tools, and whenever they see that the URL is nice and friendly like this, then they start getting super creative, and then try and find their own projects, right? And that's usually not a good thing. They usually try and find a project that they shouldn't have access for. And see, if we try and find this, it just doesn't give them anything. But if I go to the user that actually owns this one, right, then we can see the backlog. Okay, so this is basically what I'm trying to enforce here, by making sure that this is right and the other one's right. And that's just in case the user wants to come here and type stuff out, because trust me, it happens. And when it happens the most, especially when they save it, right? when they have the route and they just want to go straight to the route. Okay, so anyway, this is why I'm enforcing the route that way. But right now it's not obviously not doing any validation or anything. Right now it's just taking this, you know, garbage data, and it's just allowing me to find it, because right now I'm not using this for any type of validation. But I do want to enforce that, because this also enforces the idea that we're looking for at a project task that it's inside this project, right? I hope that makes sense. All right, so we're gonna then start implementing validation in the next lecture.